The morning, I lost everything, started like any other Wednesday. I poured coffee into my favorite mug, the one with the chipped handle that Marcus always said I should throw away. Sunlight filtered through our kitchen windows, casting golden patterns across the marble countertops we'd chosen together 3 years ago. I checked my phone. 7:43 a.m. Marcus had already left for his morning run, his routine as predictable as clockwork. I smiled, thinking about the surprise I had planned for our 5th anniversary next month. The reservation at Chateau Étoile was confirmed, and I'd already bought the watch he'd been eyeing. Everything seemed perfect in our carefully constructed life. Our brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, the successful marketing firm I'd built from scratch, the future we'd mapped out together. I had no idea that by sunset, every single piece of that life would shatter. The phone call came at 8:17 a.m. My business partner, Jennifer, her voice trembling with panic. "Sarah, you need to get to the office, now." I arrived at my office building to find police cars blocking the entrance. My stomach dropped as I pushed through the growing crowd of confused employees. Jennifer met me at the door, her face pale and streaked with tears. "The accounts are empty," she whispered. "Every single one. The business accounts, the operating fund, even the employee pension contributions." I stared at her, unable to process the words. "That's impossible. We have security measures, dual authorization required for any transfer over $10,000. She handed me her tablet showing our bank's website. Where there should have been $2.3 million in operational funds, there was nothing. Zero. The payroll account that should have held $180,000 for Friday's paychecks, empty. Our investment account, drained." "How?" My voice came out as a croak. Jennifer's eyes filled with fresh tears. "They're saying it was authorized. Both our digital signatures approved the transfers. Sarah, they went through at 6:47 this morning." My mind raced. I'd been in the shower at 6:47, getting ready for work. Detective Morris arrived within the hour, a weathered man in his 50s, with kind eyes that had seen too much. He listened as I explained our security protocols, the impossibility of anyone accessing our accounts without both Jennifer's and my authorization. "When did you last access your business accounts, Miss Chen?" he asked, making notes. "Yesterday afternoon, around 4. Everything was normal." He nodded slowly. "And your personal accounts? Have you checked those?" My blood ran cold. With shaking hands, I pulled up my banking app. My savings account, where I'd carefully accumulated $340,000 over years of hard work. Zero. My checking account. $0. Even my retirement fund had been liquidated, the early withdrawal penalties already processed. No, I breathed, scrolling frantically through the transaction history. Every cent had been transferred to an account I didn't recognize. "The transfers were authorized using your credentials," Detective Morris said gently. "Your password, your 2-factor authentication. The bank's records show everything was legitimate." I tried calling Marcus 17 times. Each call went straight to voicemail. "Marcus, please call me. Something terrible has happened. I need you." My hands trembled as I left the 18th message. Jennifer sat beside me, her own phone pressed to her ear as she tried to reach our bank's fraud department. The office had descended into chaos. 43 employees stood in clusters, whispering, staring at me with expressions ranging from sympathy to accusation. How would I make Friday's payroll? How would we survive this? Detective Morris returned with another officer. "Miss Chen, we need to ask about your husband. Marcus Chen, correct?" "Yes, but what does he have to do with this?" The detective exchanged a glance with his partner. "We've been trying to locate him. His phone is off, and his car isn't at your residence. When did you last see him?" "This morning around 7. He went for his run." "His daily route?" I nodded. The detective's expression grew grimmer. "We've checked. No one matching his description was seen on that route this morning." The next hours blurred together in a nightmare sequence. More police arrived. They searched my office, my computer, my files. Every transaction was traced, every digital footprint examined, and with each discovery the horrible truth began to crystallize. The transfers had originated from my home computer at 6:23 a.m., while I was in the shower. The passwords used were mine, including the new ones I'd created just last week. The 2-factor authentication codes had been entered correctly, sent to my phone, my phone that I'd left charging on the kitchen counter while I showered. "Miss Chen," Detective Morris said carefully, "is it possible your husband had access to your passwords?" I wanted to laugh at the absurdity. "Marcus? No, he doesn't even know what I do half the time. He's a freelance photographer, he barely understands spreadsheets." But even as I said it, memories flickered. Marcus bringing me coffee while I worked late, leaning over to kiss my shoulder, his eyes on my screen. Marcus asking casual questions about my business. By noon, I knew. The evidence was undeniable. Marcus had systematically, over months or perhaps years, gathered every piece of information he needed. My passwords, changed regularly, somehow compromised. My business partner's credentials, similarly, obtained. Our home security system showed him leaving at 6:15 a.m., not 7 as he'd told me. Camera footage from the bank showed him entering at 5:30 a.m., accessing our safety deposit box. The box I didn't know we had. Inside, he'd stored false identification, cash, and documents I'd never seen. Detective Morris showed me the security footage. There was Marcus, my husband of 5 years, calmly clearing out a deposit box, his movements practiced and confident. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. "We believe he's been preparing this for at least 18 months, the detective said. "Possibly longer. The sophistication level suggests professional assistance." I stared at the grainy image of the man I'd loved, the man I'd trusted with everything. A stranger looked back at me. My phone finally rang at 2:34 p.m. Unknown number. I answered with shaking hands, Detective Morris immediately signaling his team to trace the call. "Hello, Sarah." Marcus's voice, so familiar, so beloved, now sent ice through my veins. "Where are you? What have you done?" My voice cracked despite my efforts to stay calm. He sighed, and I could hear wind in the background, the sound of traffic. "I'm sorry it had to be this way. I really am. You were never supposed to be hurt." "Never supposed to, Marcus. You stole everything, the business, my savings, everything I've worked for. I took what I needed to disappear. Sarah, there are things you don't know about me, things I can't explain." Detective Morris was frantically gesturing, signaling me to keep him talking. "Then explain them now. We can fix this, whatever it is, we can." "There's no fixing this," he interrupted, his voice sad. "By tomorrow I'll be somewhere you can't follow. I've left you the house, that's something." The call ended after 97 seconds, not long enough for a complete trace, though they'd narrowed his location to somewhere in New Jersey. The house, our house, was indeed still in my name, small comfort when I couldn't pay the mortgage. Detective Morris's investigation expanded rapidly. They discovered Marcus Chen wasn't even his real name. The man I'd married was actually David Morrison, wanted for fraud in 3 states. Our marriage license was legal, but built on lies. Everything was lies. How did I not know? I whispered to Jennifer as we sat in my office late that evening, surrounded by lawyers and accountants trying to salvage something from the wreckage. How did I live with someone for 5 years and not know who he was? She squeezed my hand but had no answer. The truth was worse than theft. Marcus, David, whoever he was, had targeted me specifically. My successful business, my savings, my trust. I wasn't his wife, I was his mark. That night, I returned to our empty house. The police had finished their search, leaving everything disturbed and wrong. I walked through rooms that no longer felt like home, seeing evidence of his deception everywhere. The office he'd claimed was for his photography work, empty now, but the walls showed marks where equipment had been mounted. Not camera equipment, I realized, computer equipment, multiple monitors. This had been his command center, and I'd never questioned it. I'd respected his space, his privacy, just as he'd always respected mine. Or so I thought. In our bedroom, I opened his closet. Most of his clothes remained, a calculated detail to make his morning departure seem routine. But his favorite jacket was gone, his good shoes, his watch, the everyday items that meant he wasn't coming back. I sank onto our bed, my bed now, and finally let myself cry. Not for the money, though that loss was devastating. I cried for the fool I'd been, for the love I'd believed in, for the future that had never been real. Sleep was impossible. At 3 a.m., I found myself in Marcus's office with a flashlight, examining every inch. The police had been thorough, but they didn't know him like I did. Didn't know his habits, his quirks. There, behind the baseboard near his desk, a seam that didn't quite match. I pried it loose with a letter opener and found a USB drive taped to the back. My hands shook as I plugged it into my laptop. The drive contained files, hundreds of them. Photos of documents, screenshots, recorded conversations, my entire life documented and cataloged. Bank statements, business contracts, passwords written in my own handwriting from notes I'd thought were private. But there was more. Files labeled with other names, women's names. Jennifer, Amanda, Catherine, Melissa. I opened Jennifer's file and felt sick. Photos of her, her apartment, her bank statements. Marcus had been gathering information on my business partner too, probably planning to use her as a backup or additional target. I called Detective Morris immediately, my discovery too important to wait for morning. He arrived at 4:15 a.m. with 2 other officers and a digital forensics expert. "These changes everything," he said, scrolling through the files on his own laptop. "These other women, he's done this before. Miss Chen, your husband is a professional con artist and you might be the key to catching him." The other files revealed a pattern. Marcus had relationships with at least 4 other women over the past decade. Each one successful, independent, financially secure. Each one systematically drained and left devastated. "But I was different," the detective explained. "I'd been his most ambitious target and his longest relationship. He stayed with you for 5 years. The others were 18 months, 2 years maximum. You meant something different to him." I laughed bitterly. "I meant a bigger payday. Maybe," Detective Morris said thoughtfully. "Or, maybe he actually cared, and that made him sloppy. This USB drive, leaving evidence behind, that's not professional, that's personal." As dawn broke, I sat with the forensics team, watching them extract every piece of data from the drive, and then I saw it. A folder labeled Emergency hidden within layers of encrypted files. Inside was a document, a detailed contingency plan. Not his escape plan, I'd already seen evidence of that. This was something else. A plan for if things went wrong, if he was caught, if he needed leverage. And the leverage was me. The document outlined how to frame me for the theft, complete with fabricated evidence, false transaction trails, and testimony from fictional witnesses. If his escape failed, I was supposed to take the fall. "He was going to let you go to prison," Jennifer whispered, reading over my shoulder. I stared at the words, the casual cruelty of them. But as I read further, I realized something else. The plan was detailed, yes, but it had a flaw. A single point of failure that Marcus hadn't accounted for, because he didn't know something about me. Something I'd never shared with anyone, not even him. 3 years before I met Marcus, I'd been involved in a similar situation. Not as a victim, but as a witness. My college roommate had been scammed by a boyfriend who'd stolen her identity and destroyed her credit. I'd watched her fight back, watched her learn about digital forensics and evidence preservation. I'd learned too. And I'd made a decision then. Never again would I be helpless. I'd started keeping backups of everything. Not in the cloud, where someone could potentially access them. Physical backups, stored off-site, updated monthly. Every bank statement, every business transaction, every contract and agreement. I had a complete paper trail of my legitimate business operations and personal finances, stored in a secure location that Marcus had never known about. "Detective," I said slowly, "I think I have something that might help." I explained about my storage unit, rented under my maiden name, containing 3 years of meticulous financial records. Records that would prove every cent in my accounts had been legitimately earned and properly documented. By noon, we'd retrieved the files from my storage unit. 12 boxes of documents, organized by date and category. My accountant Peter arrived to help catalog everything. "Sarah, this is incredibly detailed," he said, amazement in his voice. "Most people don't keep this level of documentation." "I learned from someone else's mistake," I replied. "I never wanted to be in a position where I couldn't prove my own financial history." The documents did more than prove my legitimacy. They revealed something Marcus couldn't have known. I'd been aware of small discrepancies in our joint account for months. Tiny amounts, $50 here, $100 there. Nothing alarming, but enough that I'd started documenting them. I'd suspected fraud, possibly identity theft. I'd never suspected my own husband. "You were building a case without knowing it," Detective Morris said, examining my notes. "These discrepancies, they match the timeline of when we believe he started his final preparations." The investigation shifted. We weren't just victims anymore. We had evidence, documentation, proof. The media got hold of the story by evening. Local businesswoman's husband vanishes with millions, screamed the headlines. My phone rang constantly. Reporters, concerned friends, former clients. I ignored them all, focused on the task at hand. Jennifer and I met with our lawyer, Howard, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s who specialized in fraud cases. The good news is your documentation proves you're a victim, not a perpetrator, she said. The bad news is recovering the money will be extremely difficult. These offshore accounts he used, they're designed to be impenetrable. What about the business? Jennifer asked. Can we save it? Howard's expression was grim. That depends. You'll need emergency funding to make payroll, and you'll need to convince your clients to stay. The publicity alone could sink you. But as we talked, an idea began forming. Marcus had stolen everything, yes, but he'd also left behind something valuable. His pattern. His methodology. His targets. What if, I said slowly, we could find the others? The women he'd done this to before. What if we could warn them, or better yet, find out if any of them recovered their money? The search began immediately. Using the files from the USB drive, Detective Morris's team tracked down the other victims. Catherine Brennan, a real estate developer in Chicago, scammed 2 years ago. Amanda Foster, a tech entrepreneur in Seattle, targeted 4 years back. Melissa Wright, a surgeon in Boston, his victims 6 years ago. Each one had a similar story. A charming man who swept them off their feet, integrated himself into their lives, and vanished with their assets. But when I spoke to Catherine on the phone, she said something that caught my attention. I got some of it back, she said. Not all, maybe 30%. He'd moved the money through several accounts, but he made a mistake with one transfer. My lawyer was able to freeze it before it disappeared completely. How? I demanded. What was the mistake? He used an account that had my name on it, one he'd opened in both our names. Legally, I had standing to challenge the transfer. It took months, but we won. An account in both our names. Marcus and I had a joint account, barely used, mostly for household expenses. I'd forgotten about it in the chaos. I checked the joint account immediately. It showed a balance of $847. But the transaction history revealed something interesting. A transfer of $500,000 had passed through this account at 6:52 a.m. on the day of the theft, staying for less than 3 minutes before being moved elsewhere. Why would he route money through a joint account? I asked Detective Morris. It's traceable. It's risky. The detective conferred with his financial crimes specialist, a woman named Agent Torres. She studied the transaction history and smiled grimly. He needed to consolidate the funds before the final offshore transfer. This account was a waypoint. And you're right, it was risky. It also means you have legal standing to challenge any transactions that pass through it. Howard, my lawyer, confirmed it. If we can prove the money that went through your joint account was stolen, we can potentially trace and freeze the downstream accounts. It's a long shot, but it's a chance. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a spark of hope. Marcus had been so careful, so thorough. But he'd made one small mistake, and that mistake might be his undoing. The legal battle began immediately. Howard filed emergency injunctions, freezing accounts across 3 countries. Marcus's carefully constructed escape route started to crumble. Agent Torres traced the money's path, from my business and personal accounts to the joint account, then to a shell corporation in Delaware, then to accounts in the Cayman Islands, then to Cyprus. Each transfer left a trail, and each trail gave us more leverage. He's gonna know we're onto him, Detective Morris warned. Freezing these accounts will alert him that you're not just sitting back and accepting this. Good, I said. Let him know. Let him understand that I'm not the helpless victim he expected. That night, Marcus called again. His voice was different this time, strained, angry. You're making this harder than it needs to be, Sarah. Let it go. Let it go? I laughed, a harsh sound even to my own ears. You stole my life's work. You betrayed 5 years of trust, and you expect me to just let it go? You can rebuild, he said. You're smart, capable, but if you keep pushing, you're going to make powerful people very angry. His words sent a chill through me. What people? Marcus, who are you working with? He was silent for a long moment. I could hear his breathing, heavy and uncertain. The money wasn't just for me, Sarah. I had debts, obligations, people who don't forgive and don't forget. Then turn yourself in. Let the police help you. There are programs, witness protection. You don't understand. These aren't the kind of people the police can protect you from. He paused. Stop pursuing the money, Sarah. For your own safety, let it go. I'm telling you this because I do care about you despite everything. The line went dead. I sat staring at my phone, his words echoing. Detective Morris had been listening to the recorded call. He's trying to scare you into backing off. It's a common tactic. But Agent Torres looked troubled. Or he's telling the truth. If he was working for an organized fraud ring, recovering this money could put you in actual danger. I thought about it for exactly 10 seconds. I don't care. They took everything from me. I'm taking it back. The investigation expanded beyond simple theft. If Marcus was part of a larger operation, the FBI needed to be involved. Agent Torres brought in her supervisor, and suddenly my case became part of a broader investigation into international fraud. We'd been tracking a sophisticated network for 2 years, the FBI supervisor explained. They target successful women specifically, using romance and long-term relationships to gain access to assets. If your husband is part of this network, catching him could bring down the entire operation. I provided everything I had. The USB drive, my documentation, the recordings of his calls. In exchange, they promised to prioritize recovering my assets and protecting me from potential retaliation. Security was increased at my house. I was assigned a protective detail. My life became a strange mixture of corporate lawyer meetings and witness protection protocols. Jennifer kept the business running on emergency loans and client goodwill. Our employees, once suspicious, rallied around us once the truth became public. They understood we were victims too, fighting to save not just the company, but their livelihoods. 3 weeks after Marcus's disappearance, they found him. Not through investigation or tracing calls, but because he made another mistake. He tried to access one of the frozen accounts from an internet cafe in Portugal. The attempt triggered an alert, and Portuguese authorities arrested him within the hour. I watched the news footage of him being led away in handcuffs. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. Not the confident man I'd married, but a frightened criminal facing consequences. Detective Morris called to inform me personally. He's being extradited. He'll face charges here, and then potentially in other jurisdictions for the earlier frauds. Sarah, you did this. Your documentation, your refusal to give up. That's what caught him. But I felt no triumph, only exhaustion. The money was still missing, frozen in accounts that would take months or years to untangle. The business was running on borrowed time and borrowed money. My personal reputation was in tatters, my trust in people shattered. Did he say anything? I asked. When they arrested him, he asked if you were safe, the detective said quietly. He seemed genuinely concerned about your well-being. Marcus's trial began 4 months later. I attended every day, sitting in the gallery, watching the man I'd loved be systematically exposed as a fraud. The prosecution presented evidence of his crimes, the false identity, the previous victims, the stolen millions. They revealed his real background. David Morrison, born in Atlanta, arrested twice for minor cons before disappearing and reinventing himself. The defense tried to paint him as a victim too, coerced by the mysterious fraud network he'd mentioned on the phone. But the evidence against him was overwhelming. My documentation proved particularly damaging, showing premeditation and planning that spanned years. On the 4th day, Marcus took the stand. His lawyer asked him about his relationship with me. Did you care for Miss Chen? Yes. His voice was quiet but firm. Sarah was never supposed to be hurt. I planned to leave her the house, her car, enough to rebuild. But the people I worked for demanded everything. Who were these people? His lawyer pressed. Marcus looked directly at me for the first time since the trial began. I can't say. They'll kill me if I testify against them, and they might hurt Sarah to punish me. The judge wasn't impressed by Marcus's claims of coercion without evidence. Neither was I. But the FBI was interested. During a recess, Agent Torres approached me. He's offered to cooperate. Full disclosure about the network in exchange for a reduced sentence and witness protection. And my money? I asked bitterly. What about that? He claims he can help us recover most of it. The network hasn't moved it yet because of the freezes you initiated. If he provides access codes and account information, we could recover up to 80% of what was stolen. 80%. Not everything, but enough to save the business, to rebuild my life. What does he want in return? 20 years instead of life, protection for himself, and, she hesitated, he wants to speak to you, privately, supervised, but he says there are things he needs to explain. I wanted to refuse. The idea of sitting across from him, hearing his explanations and justifications, made me physically ill. But 80% of my money was worth swallowing my pride and my pain. Fine, I said, set it up. We met in a secure conference room, guards outside, Agent Taurus and Detective Morris present but silent. Marcus looked different in prison orange, his hair longer, dark circles under his eyes. Sarah, he began, but I cut him off. I'm not here for apologies or explanations. I'm here because you can help recover what you stole. That's all. He flinched but nodded. I can give you the account access, the codes, everything. The network hasn't moved the money because they're waiting to see if I'll break. But first, I need you to understand something. I don't need to understand anything. You were never the mark, he said urgently. When I met you, yes, that was the plan. But after the first year, I fell in love with you. Everything we built, our life together, that was real for me. I laughed coldly. Real? You stole everything from me. You documented my entire life like I was a project. You had a backup plan to send me to prison if you got caught. What part of that was real? The parts where I forgot I was supposed to be playing a role. The Sunday mornings, the quiet evenings, the plans we made. Sarah, I tried to leave the network. That's why I stayed 5 years. I was trying to find a way out that wouldn't hurt you. I wanted to believe him. Some small, broken part of me wanted to accept that our love had been real, that the betrayal had been reluctant, forced. But I looked at his face, this man I'd thought I knew, and saw only a stranger. Give them the codes, I said. Help recover the money, and then disappear into whatever witness protection hole they put you in. I never want to see you again. He nodded slowly, pulling out a piece of paper where he'd written account numbers and access codes. Agent Taurus took it, immediately stepping out to begin the recovery process. Marcus and I sat in silence for a moment. Finally he spoke. You saved yourself, you know. If you'd been just a victim, just someone to pity, you wouldn't have had the strength to fight back. But you kept those records, you refused to give up, you were smarter than I ever gave you credit for. I took everything except your plan, and that plan saved you. He was right. The storage unit full of documents, my habit of documentation, my refusal to be helpless, that had been my salvation. Not luck, not outside help, but my own preparation and determination. 6 months later, I stood in my office overlooking the city, Jennifer beside me. We'd recovered 83% of the stolen funds. The business had survived. I'd survived. Marcus was serving 15 years in a federal facility, his testimony having helped dismantle the fraud network. I'd rebuilt my life, stronger and wiser. I'd learned that trust had to be earned, that love could be a weapon, and that the best protection against betrayal was self-reliance. He'd taken everything, my money, my trust, my belief in love, but he hadn't taken my resilience, my intelligence, or my will to fight. And in the end, those were the things that mattered most. Those were the things that saved me.